We are live. Oh my gosh, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're just going to chit chat for a minute, but I am here with Alana Pearson of Represent Women. I'm so excited to talk to you about the Democracy Solutions Summit. It's such an
Yeah.
important event and one I look forward to every year, being the
Yeah.
person that I am. But Alana, and everybody, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. But Alana, how did you get involved with Represent Women? What was that path for you?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. My journey to represent women has been one that just has felt kind of written in the stars, but it wasn't like a direct shot. So I started as a journalist actually when I was quite young. First byline when I was 16. I worked for a little local newspaper in New Hampshire and did a lot of community work, and political coverage from a very young age. So I always knew storytelling and politics were going to be my
Wow.
future.
We're
Yeah, so
friends.
yeah, no, it was a great start. I always say I was kind of raised in a newsroom since I was there every day after school.
That's
And
awesome.
then I took a gap year, traveled with Up with People. So I did a lot of international volunteer work, went to American University. So really kind of got my feet into the political world there. I mean, living in DC, interned on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Annie Custer.
Were
Yeah.
you
So
at the Center for Women in Politics there? Did you work with them? Oh, they're so
I did. It was
yeah.
like a full circle moment because we've had a couple publications with Gender on the Ballot, which is put out through that institute. And so being a student there at one point and then being published in the publication later on was just like, wow, life is kind of crazy how it
Bravo.
turns out. But yeah, I worked as a policy writer after graduating for the state of New Hampshire. So did a lot of the technical policy for the Department of Health and Human Services. And then I jumped to reform with Unite America back
Oh,
in
cool.
2022, so a partner organization, and did a lot of their storytelling. My heart goes out to your book tour. I love book tours, but they are so much work because Nick
Crazy.
Troiano, yeah, he had a book tour come out while I was there, and it was a lot of work coordinating all of that. So I was with a small comms team. And then in 2024, I realized I kind of wanted to take a little step back from all of the craziness of the political world. I was feeling
Mhm.
burnt out at like 27, and that was not the trajectory I wanted to be on. So I
Yeah.
took a little beat. I walked 500 miles across Spain. I did the Camino de Santiago.
Wow.
And then I started my own digital consulting company, and a colleague said, "Hey, I think like Represent Women would be great for you to get in contact with." And then sure enough, I got brought back into the movement through a wonderful friend and former colleague, and I have found my place, and I've been with them now since July of last year.
That's
So it's been a
awesome.
journey, but again, it's like I've been in the reform space for a while, but
Yeah.
Unite America was a little different in what they focused on, and so being in women's representation just feels so in alignment with me, which is
Well, and
great.
it just seems like you have journeyed to represent women in such a wonderful way because I hear what you're saying about the grind of the political world, but represent women addresses structural issues, but in a way that's sustainable. So in so many ways, right, you were perfectly primed to sort of be their communications person because you have literally like walked the talk, right? So you're perfect
Yeah.
person to communicate that. But I of course love Represent Women. Have been such a big fan for so long. But not everybody knows about them. Can you just explain like what's Represent Women? What do y'all do? What's the pitch there?
Absolutely. So, for anybody who does not know Represent Women, first and foremost, Represent Women was founded and created by the most incredible woman who I know Larissa and I both have the pleasure of knowing, and that is Cynthia Ritchie Terrell. She is a rock star. She's been in this work for so long and is just a wealth of knowledge on everything reform related. So, she had originally been at Fairvote, which is a partner
Mm.
organization, and then she decided that she was going to kind of branch off and do women's representation because women were not a focus, and so hence Represent Women was born. And we are a national nonpartisan nonprofit, so we're a 501(c)(3), and we've spent now more than a decade tracking the systems and structural levers that increase women's representation in elected office. And so we look at that from various angles. We do tons of case studies, and we're really trying to figure out what are the best structural levers to increase
Mm.
women's representation, and not just slowly over time. Like, we need to rapidly increase women's representation in this country. Our
Yeah.
gender parity index last year said that we got a 27.3
That's F.
as our
That's F,
as our
people.
national score. So we're not doing great. There are some
No.
states that are doing better than others, but that's what we're working on. And we build coalitions across the country to help. So it's not just us. We're using our
Yeah.
data to
You
influence
know,
others in a positive way.
and in this space, we so often, right, like everybody knows my political leanings, and we often talk about those, but it's actually important to have women's representation across the political spectrum because, as your research shows, when there are more women in office, there's more uh, collaboration, there's more compromise, and more things get done. And the reality is, we don't live in a sort of one party system for better or worse, but usually for better. It's worked out pretty well for most of American history, give or take. But we don't have, what we don't have is gender equality in representation. And so I love that you all work in that nonpartisan space because it's so, so important. And, the first Represent Women Democracy Solution Summit that I attended, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, right? Alaskan Senator Lisa Murkowski was there, and they use ranked choice voting, which is an important tool to get more women represented. And I'm sorry, what's the name of the congresswoman? Um,
Yeah, so, we had
yeah,
former, Representative Mary Peltola, who,
yes,
was the first ever, Alaskan Indigenous woman elected, and she was elected under ranked choice voting. They
right.
also have a unique system, which is a top 4 system, so the top 4 candidates from the primary go on to the general, and then you rank your top 4, and then the winner of that, gets tabulated via instant runoffs, and that's how ranked choice voting is used there.
And yeah, I mean, and we'll get into what the Democracy Solution Summit is in a minute, but I'm just such a evangelical for ranked choice voting, and people don't know that it's already used in statewide elections in Alaska and Maine. You don't need a constitutional amendment. You don't need anything but a ballot measure to get that in your state for municipal, statewide, or local elections. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I'll add too, in some states that don't have ballot measures, you can actually get the legislature to put it into effect. So there are avenues for all states, whether it's a ballot measure state or a legislative state. And Oregon got so close. The legislature agreed to put it on the ballot in 2024. Voters did not actually allow it to go through, but that was a huge step, right? We saw the people say, oh, why are elected officials ever going to implement a system that could or promote it that could affect their ability to win again? And Oregon showed that they were willing to take that gamble and give it to the voters. So there's
yeah.
progress on all fronts.
And I would just say to your point, even when we lose, even when we don't win, we don't lose, right? Because it's about introducing it to the public. I mean, that's true of women's suffrage, right? It took a long time, generations to get it through, but if we had never started, we never would have got it in 1920. And I think of, Shirley Chisholm being the first Black person and one of the first women to run for president. Were it not for her, and so many others, right? We would not have come as far. So I'm always like
Yeah,
telling my kid, particularly my one little kid who hates to lose, I'm like, if you don't lose, you'll never win. We have
exactly. It's
to.
we're playing the long game in reform. And when you look at any reforms, they did not happen overnight. When you look at gay marriage, that did not happen overnight. When you look at civil rights, that did not happen overnight. But when we play the long game, it just means that every, momentary loss does not mean that we've lost the entire, battle, so to speak. Like, it's just one minute moment.
And I think women are particularly adept at playing the long game. For whatever reason, you just look at women's movements and they have this long arc, right? This understanding that we got to keep marching, we can't give up. We pass the torch on from one generation to another. And, I talk about that a lot in my writing, where we're part of a generation's long tradition of trailblazers. We just got to keep going. And Represent Women is such an incredible part of that. And one of the things that I love is that you all really do a good job of, just to extend the metaphor of, giving your light to so many to continue the path forward. I do want to pivot specifically to the Democracy Solution Summit because, at this moment, right, when we feel assailed on all levels, on every side by what's going on, it's difficult to even take a breath, take a beat, say, okay, I know the problem. What's the solution? And right, it's in the title, Democracy Solution Summit.
Solution Summit. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what it is and what y'all are doing with this incredible? It's 3 days this year, right? 3 day event.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
3-day event, so it's March 10th through March 12th, from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so it's not a huge, commitment per day, but it's absolutely worth registering and signing up for. So the Democracy Solution Summit is actually in its 5th year this year, which is so exciting, and it was the brainchild of Cynthia. So just to give a little backstory on why this even came to be, it was about 6-ish years ago. Cynthia came back from yet another conference and was looking at panels throughout all the sessions, and there were just men on every panel. There were the male experts, male moderators, and there was rarely a woman in sight. And for her, she came back and thought, there are fabulous women out there. Who are experts and trailblazers and should be given a platform to share their expertise. Why aren't women more frequently featured on these
Mm.
big panels about solutions? And
Right.
so instead of just kind of sitting in frustration, she said, well, if no one's going to create a summit that is all women, then I'm going to do it. And so hence this brainchild for the Democracy Solution Summit was born. And the unique thing about the Democracy Solution Summit that we put on every year is that it is led by women and only women. So we have all women speakers and all women moderators who are featured during this event. And it's the only event that you'll see in the democracy space that is solely focused on uplifting the voices of women and allowing them to have a seat at the table equally as they should on every panel. But we really create that space for it. And so it's a national virtual convening, which is amazing because we know people often can't come to a physical space. That's a barrier for a lot of women. So
Huge,
again,
huge.
another huge barrier. So another way to address that barrier is by making it virtual, and we make it free. We do not want finances to be a barrier either. So this is a fully free, fully virtual convening that we put on. And this year, we're just very excited. We've got a fabulous slate of women who will be joining us, and we're kind of changing our structure and approach a little bit with the themes this year to make it more accessible for even our panelists. We realized a barrier was our women experts are busy. And so if we have them locked into a specific, like small, narrow panel on a certain day and they can't make that one, then we're also not being accommodating to them and meeting them where they're at. And so we made it so that it was a little bit more flexible for our speakers to share their expertise.
I also just want to pause and talk about the lack of barriers to attendance because as a women's historian, I see time and again that it's not the wo- that it's often not the women who have access to privilege and power who make the biggest difference in their communities and in our nation, right? It's often women who see problem in their community, want to address it, and then realize that it's not just their community, it's the whole country, if not the whole world, who are facing those issues. And to give women who, right, usually don't have access to this kind of information, these tools, and frankly, these women who have experience, right, on your panels. You have congressmen and senators and long term activists who are all lending their wisdom experience, right, for free virtually. And for us to be able to learn from is really powerful. And, I just also want to mention you had said you worked for a local paper. And Tip O'Neill's famous axiom, all politics is local, right? Like all news is local too. And all grassroots action is
Is
local.
local. Yeah.
And if we have learned anything from this current situation, it's that local action is the most important action. So for anyone listening out there, I would really encourage you to show up, to just listen. And I know that if you want to make a change, you want to make a difference in community, you're going to find your place. And this is a great place to start. So I love that you don't have barriers to participation. But I also want to talk about your theme, right? Because that's women's power by design. And
Yes.
again, like as a historian and also as an observer of contemporary politics, I gotta be honest, it's really men's power by design, right? The system is designed to favor white, moneyed, privileged men, and that's who it was designed by. Okay, I get it. But you're talking about how we can change that system. So can you talk a little bit about the theme and why it's important for those structural changes? It's not just about voting, it's about how we vote, right?
Exactly. It's the whole ecosystem. So our kind of new tagline of this year is like women's power by design, because women's power and political representation doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intentional design. And so in order to get there, we need to be pushing forth the different structural levers, the numerous policies that help pave the way for women to not only get elected and have a seat at the table, but also to be effective in their leadership, which is a really critical piece as well. So, designing power is at every level of the pipeline. So, it's from running for office, it's from winning office, it's from serving, and then also leading effectively. And so, here we're really looking at all right, what are the various ways that we are designing women's power to have better outcomes at all of those levels that we're looking at? And so, this year, in order to do that, we're kind of not just focusing in on a specific single reform. In the past, we've looked at just ranked choice voting, or just a specific aspect of reform. This year, we're really looking at the full ecosystem. So, what's happening at all of the different layers of this that's helping, lift all boats? What are we doing to design across the spectrum to ensure that women have power, that women feel safe? That women feel empowered to run campaigns, and that women can lead and in a different way, especially running in RCV campaigns. Like, what does that do to campaign dynamics? And we're even looking at some funding this year on like why philanthropy is part of the design process of encouraging women and uplifting them. So it's really that holistic approach. Women's power by design is not kind of a narrow focus; it's a broad focus this year.
Yeah, I mean, so let's get into that a little bit because, right, we did address ranked choice voting, and that's super important. But okay, let's say we have more women in office, right? How do we build coalitions? And I just, again, you see, and I'm not putting down men or anything like that. I feel like every this. It's not all men. But right, there's this sort of sense of learning by osmosis, right? Like there's an old boys club. You just sort of learn to do it by doing it. You have de facto mentors. And women don't have that. In fact, they have the opposite, right? Like as again, Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't have a chair for you at the table, you have to bring your own chair. But how do you build that chair? Right. And I think it's really and then let's say we want our own gosh darn table, right? Like where do we get
Yeah.
the table and how do we invite people there? So can you talk a little bit about maybe some speakers who are going to be addressing how they build coalition in power or before they get to power? Like what's that going to look like in the summit itself?
Yeah, so we've broken up our summit into 3 days, that are kind of unique in their theme. So the first day is where we've been. And so this is a really critical day because we didn't get to this point in women's representation, as you know, as a historian, just miraculously. There was a lot of work, a lot of effort put into empowering women and creating pipelines. So I will shout out Larissa will be joining us on day one. I'm so excited to have
I'm
you
so excited.
for a little fireside chat about your new book, talking about Jeanette Rankin and the trailblazing nature of her legacy and how that's really paved the way for so many women. So I will say it was actually looking at your book and what you have done that has kind of gotten us thinking, hey, we do need to talk about the legacy that got us here. And we haven't focused on that as much. So you've had a
Yeah.
huge impact on our team in that regard. And so we're looking at the just various levels of progress. So we're actually focusing in on the Equal Rights Amendment as one of our
Mhm.
conversations. It's
Mhm.
such a critical focus for us to be talking about, not just at the federal level, but on state ERAs.
Yes.
And so for that conversation, we'll have Dr. Michelle Goodwin. She is a amazing, renowned constitutional law professor, a constitutional lawyer. She works at Georgetown University, and so she'll be joining us on the first day to talk about the ERA, the legacy from the legal aspects of it, as well as some other experts in the ERA space. So more exciting people to come for that that I'll be sharing. We're not trying to share everybody, just as we're trying to figure that out. But Michelle Goodwin will really be our cornerstone for that conversation. And we're also talking about the Year of the Woman this year,
Mhm.
and the transformative power that Emily's List has had. So when we talk
Yeah.
about the pipeline and how women have gotten to where they are, if you look at Emily's List and what it has done for the Democratic women who have run since it was launched, it's in its 40th year this year.
Well, just
And
for anybody who doesn't know out there, give us a quick breakdown of what Emily's List is.
yeah, so Emily's List is a PAC that ends up actually able to fund campaigns for women to run effectively, and they did not have that resource before, and so Ellen Malcolm created it. We may have Ellen. We are hopeful. We're gonna manifest that as a whole group here. Everyone on the
Lynn.
live, let's manifest it. That's what I've been saying to our team. We're manifesting these people.
Love
But
it.
we will have Senator Barbara Boxer, who has been confirmed,
Mm,
incredible trailblazer of a woman, and she actually was in that first year of the woman. She was in the first class that was helped be put into office, in part because of the impact of Emily's List.
right.
And so she will be joining us, which is fabulous. And she's not the only former elected that we'll have. As I mentioned earlier, I interned for Congresswoman Annie Custer. And so she's actually joining us, which feels like another full circle moment.
Homecoming. That's so
I
great.
know.
Talk about
And
passing the torch.
right, and she was so excited to join, and she's actually created her own PAC, to elect women, and it has raised something like 18 million. That might be conservative, since she, like, what was it, 2018? And she's
Wow, that's
no
huge.
longer in office, but she's really been doing a lot for women. She led a ton of initiatives on women's health. She was one of the foremost women leading different sexual violence prevention legislation, bipartisan, while she was in Congress. So she's just a huge champion for women, and also someone that I just think is a fabulous person. So we're very excited to have her. And we'll also be going into the Voting Rights Act on day one,
Mm,
because the Voting Rights Act enfranchised so many individuals, women, Black women in particular, such a
yes.
critical piece of law. And with this current Supreme Court case, Louisiana v. Calais, it may get rolled back. We are uncertain of where that stands. And so, what is, the status of the ERA, and looking at the history of it and to why it matters to today? So we'll have April Albright of Black Votes Matter Fund joining us to talk about that, as well as Lakeisha Steele, who is at Fair Vote. And so they will be really kind of laying the landscape for that, and also talking about how why state VRAs are so important. Vermont is trying to codify it into their law right now. So there is work
Oh,
being done.
that's so
But
cool.
we have
And I
them
wanna get
stated.
into that real quick, but I
Yeah.
also wanna say, women's right to vote are just under so much attack with the SAVE Act, now the MEGA Act or the SAVE Act 2. Yeah, and I want to address something that was said in the chat by Arlene, who mentioned that not all women are for other women, right, in elected office. And that's so true. We can't argue that. Like, there's so many examples of that. But one of the things that Represent Women has shown statistically, which I go back to again and again, because there's so much data in what y'all do. You're not just like making stuff up. You're like, here's the
No.
science, here's the data. And it shows when there's gender parity or a greater representation of women in a legislative body, it is more efficient, more effective, and more in favor of women's rights. Okay. And also, like, all rights, all people's rights. And while we do have those outliers and we can all name them, they're just on the tip of our tongue. And Arlene, I'm not calling you out. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing this up. But, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We know that it's a numbers game, and it's long term. Like, when we elect more women, it's better for everyone. And I also do just want to say, and we can get into this or not, Alana, but so when we don't have at least 30% of a legislature women, right, then we're functioning in a system that pits women against each other. And what do legislatures look like when you have gender parity? I think those dynamics begin to change.
They
And
do, and if I can jump in, if we look
please,
at New Mexico, for example, they actually have a majority, women legislature, and in New Mexico, a really critical piece of legislation that was passed, was universal free childcare.
mm,
Childcare is a huge barrier for, individuals, not just women, but there are single stay-at-home dads as well who,
sure.
need support, and so childcare is a huge expense regardless of what your family structure looks like, but to pass having, you know, free universal childcare, that does enfranchise so many women. And it was the women's led legislature that was able to promote that. And then you look at it where it could have maybe not been signed into law, But you've got Michelle Lujan Grisham as the governor, who's another woman who said, yes, absolutely, we are going to sign this into law. So that was just one piece of recent legislation where you see that women's issues, family issues were a focus, and then they were also brought into law. And the same thing in New York. They now have universal free school lunches. And that was pushed by women and it took a long time. And again, playing the long game, they'd been pushing it and pushing it, the teachers' unions for a hot minute, and it just kept failing. And then State Senator Michelle Hinchy really pushed forth with that, created a coalition, got it passed. And then again, you've got the first female governor of New York, and it was signed into law within their budget. So these are just two examples of where women have been able to lead effectively and also put out policies that matter to women and families and communities.
Yeah, and it's not just about elected offices, right? Like Mom Donnie's transition team, I think,
All
was
women.
100% women,
Yep.
and you have a shift of perspective and how do you say, like, what's important. And it's if I think a lot of women are reluctant to run for office, or they say, hey, I think my representative is doing an okay job, or I just can't take on running for office. But there's so many ways to get involved, right, in politics and in change. And I just want to pivot back. We kind of got away from this,
I know, it's okay.
but how can is this summit going to address how, like, women who don't want to run for office get involved and make change in their communities, or affect policy with their legislators?
Definitely. So day 2 is focused on where we are. And so
Mm,
that's a really great day to kind of get a lay of the land on what's happening across the country, where are elected officials at. And so one representative that we will have joining us on day 2 is Representative State Senator or State Rep Liz Berry from
oh,
Washington State. I don't know if you know her, but if you
I know
don't,
of her. Yeah.
you should look into her. She is amazing. And right now, a big conversation has been safety for women. Women are often saying, I don't want to run for office if it's going to put my family at risk. I don't want to run for office if, I'm going to be doxxed, if I'm going to have harassment online, with AI as well, there aren't regulations. So there's just so much that could potentially affect women. And political violence, unfortunately, is on the rise in this country. And so Liz Berry said, I know that this is a problem and I want to do something about it. And so she's proposed a bill to address political violence. And it has passed the House. Represent Women and other coalition partners like Vote Mama and other folks that we've worked with all came to the table. We testified and gave our data showing that political violence is a problem. It's a barrier for women, and that this is a critical piece of legislation. And so tomorrow, it will go to the Senate. So we don't know what will happen in the, Washington State Senate, but this is a bill that is moving forward because a woman has proposed it. And she's also a supporter of ranked choice voting. She was only able to run because of campaign finance reforms that allowed funding to also pay for childcare in the state of Washington. So she's
Um,
really a trailblazer that shows how policies matter. And so she will be speaking a little bit more about how we can be getting involved in different ways to promote safety for women in this juncture in time. And we just did a piece, actually, if people haven't read it, on our website. We did it in December about online violence and how it's also disproportionately impacting Black women. And what are the mitigation what are the ways we can mitigate it? So that's a great piece to look at to get pre-reading kind of insights on what Liz Berry will be talking about.
yeah, and it's so important to have an understanding of the ecosystem in which we're all living, right? Like, as I can say, as a white woman, it's easy to ignore or not ignore, but be willfully ignorant of what is happening to, Black women and brown women and Asian women and Indigenous women in this country, right? Because I do have that privilege, but in in shielding myself behind that privilege, I'm actually doing myself a disservice, because it benefits me when they are able to exercise their freedoms and use their voice, because we know that, right, when we stand together, we are stronger. So that's such an important piece, and I'm, like, not going to cry. But
Yeah.
thank you for highlighting that. And I just want to, like, throw it back to, I don't know what, empathy is so important, and I'm gonna talk about Jenna Rankin for a minute, but right, she was America's first congresswoman. She's also pacifist. She also went with the Women's International League in Peace and Freedom. I'm talk really fast because I don't want to take up all the time.
Yeah, no,
But
it's okay.
to draft a alternative to the Treaty of Versailles, but because America really didn't experience, right, the um most harmful effects of World War I, the American contingent went to Europe to tour the battle sites and to talk to survivors to gain empathy. And it was with that empathy that they took to draft these alternative resolutions to the Treaty of Versailles. So without empathy and without researched empathy, we can't really begin to create these coalitions that we need as women to build the power structures that we're talking about. So I really love that you and Represent Women are highlighting that because it is incredibly important and vital. Um, let's talk about day 3 of the conference. I now know that I'll have to just tell everyone that I am unavailable for anything for these 3 days because I want to go to every panel.
Yeah, and before, we jump to day 3, I just wanted to shout out that we actually will be having the former First Lady of Iceland, Eliza Reid, opening day 2, which is really incredible. Eliza Reid is a trailblazer. She was, the former First Lady from 2016 to 2024, when her husband was elected president, and so she has traveled the world doing speeches, and her whole thing is about, how do we increase gender equality and
Mhm.
where do we utilize storytelling? Again, right, to connect, for empathy, for, where do you use your voice even when you don't feel like you have a platform? Because you do. Any person, as women, we have a platform, which is finding how we utilize that voice. So she'll really also start the day with talking about where we are now, how we can utilize storytelling, how we can utilize our voice, even if it feels like it's in a small way. And so she'll be starting our day. She's got a memoir coming out called The First Lady Next Door this spring. So I pre ordered my edition. If other people want to pre order, she is just such a special person, and we're so blessed to have her speak with us on day 2. And we also will be looking at where we are internationally because we do not want to recreate the wheel, right? There are so many countries that are doing better than us. They have different systems. And what can we learn from them? We can, adopt different parts of systems to help, but we won't be able to do that if we don't understand what other countries are doing. So, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I just wanna pause because someone said again in the chat, and I'm trying to get to the chat, right? Because I want this to be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
conversation with folks. They said, "This is such a partisan moment," and it is. But going back to this idea of storytelling, right? Like take it out and platform, like take it out of the partisan realm. Say, I lost my health insurance because they didn't renew the ACA subsidies and now, I can't get my medication. You don't have to make it a partisan issue, but when you talk about your stories, when you talk about the things that you've gone through, and when you open up with vulnerability, that's when you can start to build bridges, right? And so you might see it, you might think it's a small platform, but my gosh, we have just like this country, we've just burnt so many bridges to the ground. We got to start building it up small. And when we lay a single brick as a person, right? That's a single brick in a road that we're all building together. And there's no more important act you can do. So again, I think people are often overwhelmed, but it's like the little things are the most important things. But I also love that you're connecting it internationally because so often we have this sort of, America centric focus, but so much important work on international or on women's representation is being done in other countries. That's so exciting to learn about.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, Dr. Michelle Harrison will be joining us, and she does the Reykjavik Global Index, and so it tracks where we are, and so she'll be kind of sharing a little bit more of an insight on that. And in addition to the partisanship aspect, Michelle Harrison, actually, Katie Usalis from our team, was in Reykjavik and did a piece with her and Richard Reeves about the backlash against women's leadership and what it tells us about young men.
Mm,
And so but it was again, it's all about storytelling where Richard Reeves says, if you just kind of come at a young man with all these kind of targeted points and you don't bring it back to like, but think about your sister or a friend or a daughter and you frame it in that way, then all of a sudden the conversation shifts. And so again, it's that storytelling. How do you bring your lived experience into that? And Michelle will also be able to speak to that in conjunction with data and what that shows us on day 2.
that's amazing. So what are we looking at day 3? How are we gonna bring this home?
Yes. So we also need to figure out where we're going, because we can't stay where we are here. We've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, it's the question of where are we going? I don't know. It's a crazy time. I don't have a roadmap. What do I do when everything feels like an emergency or, a
Yeah,
five-alarm fire? And
yeah.
so we're trying to say, let's slow down because we have to slow down to speed up. That's like a big phrase I like to use. And so let's slow down and see what's already being done. And then how do we speed up using that? So we'll open the day with people, women from our movement. So this is where the ranked choice voting, the proportional representation, the on the ground state level, local level reforms will come in, and we have a fabulous slate of women. We've got Scylla Absol from New Mexico Voters First. She is one of the foremost young women in New Mexico. She was in, I think, Albuquerque's 40 under 40. She is my age. She's younger than me. Scylla is a friend and a rock star. And so she'll be talking about what's happening in New Mexico for women. They actually have an all women city council in Las Cruces, and what's kind of gone on there. How has ranked choice voting impacted that city council since they were elected under that? We'll have Tamaya Denard, our own team member. She's a policy and partnerships manager, talking about our work a little bit more and how we're building coalitions across the country. We've got Tamara Allen of Upvote Virginia, who's working on ranked choice voting, a fabulous young woman doing great work in Virginia. Marcela Miranda Perito, she is running California RCV. And for those that don't know, Los Angeles is considering ranked choice voting and council expansion. And the hope is that it will be like Portland, modeled after that with the proportional ranked choice voting in multi-member districts. And so she'll be talking about what's happening in LA, the second largest city in the country. So
Yeah.
that's a huge step. And then Julie Lucky will be joining us from Alaskans for Better Elections to talk a little bit more about what's gone on in Alaska and how the transformative impact of ranked choice voting is not just changed who wins, but how people campaign, the coalitions that people have built. So that will all be part of day 1 to start out.
Okay, so let's just pause because I know that the summit isn't just about RCV, which, ranked choice voting, but it's so important. And what struck me with what you just said was like Alaska does it and LA is considering it. Right? Can you imagine two more different places in the United States of America than Los Angeles and Alaska? And yet RCV can work for both of these places. Like, can you talk about why that is? I know some people have just joined us, so maybe just like quick explanation about what ranked choice voting is and then why it is such a flexible system, right? Why does it work for
Yes.
Alaska and Los Angeles?
Yeah, it works for Alaska, Los Angeles, Maine, and they also have it in places like Minnesota. St. Paul, under RCV, elected the first Hmong American woman as mayor this last election, and for the second time in a row, they have an all-women city council. So these are just great examples. But why ranked choice voting works is
Mm,
instead of just having a candidate, two people running, and you are trying to curry the favor of a small cohort. Like, I need to have X amount of people vote for me or I won't win. And then you've got a couple different candidates in the primary, you're going to split votes, you're going to have a general person go to the general with maybe only 20% of the vote in the primary. And that's not good. We want a majority winner at every level because we want the majority of constituents to have actually supported and endorsed a candidate.
yeah,
And so
it's
instead
not
of
about who was able to make enough wedge issues that they could prop themselves up. It's about who could build enough coalition and
yeah,
consensus, right? Like imagine that shift in electoral politics. Imagine if it
it's
was about
huge.
coalition building and not driving people apart. I think there's a word for that. What is it? Oh yeah, it's democracy. Right, that's what it is.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
that's the
continue.
exact thing. It's the coalitions that you build in this hyper partisan, environment that we're in. Campaigns, you often see a lot of mudslinging, and you are taking digs, and that is just not a productive way to run a democracy at all. And so, what ranked choice voting does is it flips it on its head. Instead, you are saying, I don't want to kind of try and dig at my opponent because instead, I want to ensure that those people that might be voting for my opponent as their number one choice like me enough that they're going to vote for me as their second choice. And if that happens and my opponent doesn't get enough votes outright in the first tabulation, then it'll go and I might carry those second choice votes, and that could bring me higher up. And so you
Okay.
create this. Yeah, go
So
ahead,
let me just
Trisha.
pause because I want to talk about Jeanette Rankin because it gives a really concrete example of this,
Yeah.
right? So Jeanette Rankin, first woman elected to Congress through ranked choice voting, 1916, Montana. Okay, can you believe it? Her slogan was vote for your local man and vote for Jeanette Rankin. So she's like, it's not a zero sum game. You like your guy. I love him too. Just pick me number two. And that's how she got the Republican nomination to continue on to the primary. And then that's how she came in second because it was an open state. Everybody got to rank their choices for Congress. And she came in second and therefore was able to win. But for anybody who's like, oh, how does that work? Just think, vote for your local man and vote for Jeanette Rankin, and that's how it works. But anyway, please continue. I just want
Yes, no, I
to
love that. I
contextualize
love
that.
that
Yeah.
phrase. I'll have to, like, clip that to put out on our socials. That's, I think,
Yeah.
such an important thing to put out there. But yes, it changes the entire dynamic. And then one thing we see with women in particular is I'm sure you've probably experienced somebody saying, like, "I really like that woman. I think that she's going to be great, and I would love to vote for her. But strategically, I don't know if she's gonna get enough votes, and I don't wanna waste my vote. I don't wanna split the vote, and I don't want a crazy loon to be the one that gets elected in that
Right.
person's place. So instead, I'm gonna vote for whoever feels like the more strategic candidate where it's safe for me to cast that ballot." And that's not a great way to run an election either, because then you see all these other women who are told, "Wait your turn," or, "You don't wanna split the vote, so maybe I should just not run at all." And in ranked choice voting systems, that doesn't
Or just
happen.
or just or just stay in the PTA, sweetie. You don't need to run for the state house or Congress. Just, stay where you are, which is there's so much talent, right? Of female politicians sort of trapped in super municipal positions that would be totally amazing, in larger elected offices. So again, if you're one of those women out there like PTA, making stuff happen for your kid's school, super effective, think about what you could do in Congress.
Yeah, and I mean, Mayor Kaoli Her of St. Paul, Minnesota,
Mhm.
she had worked in the mayor's office. She'd been a representative and, was saying to the mayor previously, "Hey, like, people don't feel like they're hearing from you. You're not representing them as well. Maybe you want to pivot," because she originally wasn't gonna run.
Yeah.
And it just felt she said, "I don't feel like I was being heard." And so it was the local people in her community who were saying, "Why don't you run? Like, I would vote for you if you were running for mayor. Why aren't you running?" And ranked choice voting also changed the game there because if there had been a traditional primary, she would have missed the window. She jumped in with only 3 months before the election, but under ranked choice voting, she was able to. And she knocked over 60,000 doors in 3 months. This woman went from like 0 to gear 6 overnight, and she was able to then also the coalition building was what really helped her, where she said, "I understand if I'm not your first choice, but I would love to be your second." And in the end, ranked choice voting allowed her to win,
Yeah.
that position. It was because of the second choice votes. But again, she wouldn't have even been able to enter. I think that's the other thing. Ranked choice voting changes the entry process in certain systems where, like, you can enter later. You aren't barred by those, limiting dynamics. And if you do put in the work and you build a coalition and people encourage you to run, then
Yeah.
you can end up like her. Truly, her last name's Her. And so it's just a great
I love
example.
that. I love like her.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I'm with her. It's a new life for that one. I do just want to pause and read Cynthia's comment because it speaks to what you're talking about, Alana. Cynthia
Yeah.
says RCV changes both the campaign process, providing candidates an incentive to find commonalities, but also changes in governing process too, ensuring voters have more power to hold their elected officials accountable, which is exactly what you're talking about, right? It's like, oh, you're not listening to me, but what is the mechanism that I can make you listen to me? And let's say even if she hadn't won, right? Even if she had come in a close second, that's going to make that elected official sit up and listen next time. And again, that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, right? Even when we don't win, we don't lose. Because when we
Exactly.
can stand up, when we have a platform, when we can speak, that's when we can make a difference. And RCV, whether or not we get elected to office, which clearly we do, women get elected more often within RCV. it allows us to have a voice. I do just want to pivot and I want to talk about the elephant in the room because I want to go back to the SAVE Act because the SAVE Act 2.0,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to make this super partisan because I know you're all partisan, but the SAVE Act 2.0 makes ranked choice voting illegal. It says you cannot have ranked choice voting. And I'm not sure if that's on a national for statewide offices and national elections, or if that's all the way down to municipal offices. But it's really scary when every avenue to having not only our voices, not only be elected in office, but also just having our voices heard are being assailed, right? I just think of like, I don't want to go into it, but it's really scary. And I think you all at Represent Women do a really good job, right, of outlining the dangers but, like, keeping a level head about
Mhm.
it and being like, "No, we got this, women. We can do this together." And I we're running short on time, so I just wanna talk about, like, what are the takeaways from this conference? Like, when people attend, what can they walk away with to say, "Okay, now I'm informed and I have these actionable steps." Like, what are those actionable steps we're gonna be able to take away from this conference? From this
Definitely. Yeah, that's a great, question. And just to answer about the SAVE Act, it would be for federal, general elections. And I went to the hearing on Capitol Hill last week. So, if you want any more insights on what's going on with the mega act, which is SAVE Act 2.0, happy to provide those. But it is what we're looking for is A, right now, we want women to leave feeling like A, your voice is able to be heard. That there are women who are we're standing on their shoulders, and then the people who are listening, like, you're standing on ours, like, we are creating and it's not even like I don't like ladders because that feels hierarchical. It's like we're creating a circle, okay? Like, we're
Yes,
creating this circle
yes.
of change, and parity starts with participation. So, even just tuning in and becoming educated, that is helping us get closer toward parity, because if you're in a conversation with somebody and they're asking, "Why aren't women being elected more?" or "That candidate seemed great, what happened?" Then you are empowered with the knowledge to be able to say, "Well, this is the reason X, Y, and Z, and this is the solution." So we want people to be also spokespeople for these reforms, for these structural levers. And in order to become a spokesperson, you have to know the background and talking points. So we are going to be putting out, kind of those quick brief, like if someone's asking you X, Y, or Z about ranked choice voting or proportional systems, like this is how you can explain it. So we want people to be equipped with messaging that they can bring to their local communities. We also want people to have an understanding of like who's in the space, who are the allies maybe in your state. We have this fabulous women's expert in democracy directory, which I don't feel like is utilized as much as perhaps it could be. It's on our website, and you can see who are leading experts in the democracy and women's representation space within your state, within your community. I don't know if you're on there, Larissa, but we will need to make sure you are if you are not. But
I
we
put
will
my
be
name.
all
I put my name.
yeah, we'll be directing people to this democracy space. We'll be ensuring that people know that we have a women's power collaborative as well, which is like a running feed that people can share insights and ask, questions. How do I get more involved in my state, or what's happening in this area? So we'll be also promoting that during it.
And I
Um,
just wanna
yeah,
I just wanna stop down and say how important that is because any space I'm in, because I kinda occupy an arts and literature space too, in addition to politics. People are always saying, "Who are the people? Where's my community? Where are the resources?" And that's what often holds us back from making change or creating what we wanna see, and those are both incredible resources, right, that we can all utilize to affect change right now in our communities. And also, like, again, I have to say, with the election results of 2024, I started the female body politic. And from that, I have been able to be part of and create a community that has been so empowering. Not just in terms of like creating change, but also in just, I don't know, like knowing people like you are doing the work that you're doing gives me this sense of peace where I'm just like, "Oh, no, we have this. There's no way that Alana Pearson is gonna be defeated." Like, she is a rock star, and she is one among many, and the more we can cultivate that feeling of power in community, the more effective we are personally. So I encourage everybody just to like make friends because
Yeah,
it's the whole ball game. And more than just sort of a database of, people who you can look up. It's really friend groups with similar interests to yours, and that interest just happens to be the preservation of democracy.
yeah.
It's no more
I think that's just
intimidating than knitting.
matriarchy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like, patriarchy is all hierarchical and climbing a ladder, and matriarchy is a circle. It is focused on, like, children and community, and so, we are also kind of combating that, like this is me speaking from my own personal
sure,
capacity,
sure.
but, like, the patriarchy, in that if we create this circle of community, that is embodying what the matriarchy can be, and, like, we all can be a piece of that, and so we just are very, excited to create a space where people can come into this community that we have built and not feel like it's a one-off event, but we have all these different opportunities for people to get involved, whether, again, it's through our Women's Power Collaborative, whether it's through our Democracy Directory. We do testimony. We would love for people in different parts of the country to be looped in to also provide testimony if you care about things. Like, we are here to be a resource on that, and we want to be able to showcase how you can get involved in the nonpartisan way
Yes.
following our election. Yeah, we're never
Yeah,
going to do
because
the
everybody's
partisan pitch,
welcome.
but
Everybody, a lot of people I know, both sides of the aisle, think democracy is in crisis. That's a nonpartisan issue. And this is especially women. And this is a way forward for all of us to get together and to have those conversations. Um, all right. So last sort of, action takeaways that we can, expect from the summit. And then let's go back and say, how can we register and where can we find to represent women?
yes, okay. The final takeaway for the summit is you don't want to miss it. We have incredible speakers this year. And again, we're manifesting a couple other big ones, potentially some newly elected female leaders from the Pink Wave, as we're calling it, from last year. And so we also have members of the Democratic Women's Caucus who'll be joining to talk about their Better Futures agenda on day 3. So you'll actually be able to hear from elected officials in Congress right now. So these are just a few of the many people that will be joining us. And then we have a little surprise on day 3 as well that is just going to, I think, make everyone's hearts really happy. But I'm going to keep that a surprise. But I would just say if you can carve out to even make it to part of a day
Yeah.
or make it to one of the 3 days online where you're able to get your tickets, you can either book for all 3. Or you can pick select days that work for you. So whatever you're interested in, we highly encourage you to sign up and just reserve that ticket. Get it on your calendar so calendars get booked up, and so it's just reserved. And you can get your ticket. It's via Eventbrite. It's free. And I don't know if I can put it in the
I'll
chat.
share it in the post, because this.
Okay, perfect, awesome.
But,
Yes,
yeah, and so it's representwomen.org. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization about getting more women in office because goodness knows we need it. Well, thank you
yes.
so much, Alana. You've been such an incredible guest, and I love talking with you. And I'd love to have you on anytime just to talk about more about, the mega bill or any other issues with women's representation, the obstacles and the solutions. Because you are such an incredible spokeswoman and just such a jewel, such a gem.
It was such an
Love
honor to
you.
be listening speaking with you today. I listened into your book launch, and it was kind of my first introduction to you, and it was just, kind of a surreal moment to be on the other side of the screen today, and I can't wait, for anybody here who's in DC, Larissa's got her amazing Politics and Prose. You gotta promote
With
that, and my
Cynthia,
podcast
yes.
coming on.
Yeah.
That Cynthia from Represent Women will be
March
joining
6th,
Larissa March 6th.
7 p.m., Politics and Prose at the Wharf. Please come out, say hello. We'd love to see you.
Yes. So, well, thank you again for taking the time and creating this space. And we will see you next month, March 10th, for Larissa's Fireside Chat.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.